was muted.
No worries, I figured as much. I was like, oh, I know what's happened. Discord's messed around or something. Something in Windows Update has muted something. There's always something weird that happens. How are you doing, mate? How's your week been?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine.
Good to hear. Awesome, mate. So, I mean, today is our last of the current package of sessions, but it's also one where, I mean, we've been working together for a while and stuff. So, I mean, I'll hop straight into this replay just to have some eye candy going in the background and that sort of stuff, and, you know, hopefully pick up some notes and things as that goes. But I want to try and kind of define some kind of things we'd like to get out of today if possible before we get too deep into it. So I'll just get that replay going in the background. Not really going to look at it. Going to look at your document for now. So obviously we want to work on TVT, we want to work on TVP, and there's those two broad categories. You said basically we're to work on obviously getting good systems for defending the early aggression, but we've also got to have predefined attack timings so that you really know when and where to push a Protoss and Terran to give you more direction in the play, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool, man. So outside of that, I think one of the big things we need to kind of work on is the same thing that we always are struggling with as a StarCraft player, and that is our ability to not just identify the problem, but to aggressively choose a direction to experiment with, even if we're not 100% sure, right? So I guess, okay, so other than all that stuff, today I want there to be an overarching focus on choosing responses and committing to them. And basically, you know, not just identifying problems, but really being proactive with coming up with solutions. Okay, so for that case, there's a few things. Basically, I want to try and help rework your mental process post game, right? So if we think about it, every time we play a game, there's a little bit of review that goes on, right? Especially if it's like a really long macro game, you try to kind of remember, wait, okay, this, you know, what just happened in that game? Where did I fall behind? What did I do well that I want to repeat in future? Sometimes, you know, you pull out one of those really cool tactical maneuvers. You're like, oh, this was a great idea I came up with in that game and it worked really well. What happened? Where did I fall behind? And do I understand my opponent's build? Right? So those are some things which I'm going to emphasize more in the homework after today than in today's actual session. But the other bigger one is going to be, okay, I think you've got great skill over the time we've been working together, the last couple months, at identifying, you know, systematic problems in your replays. Right? We've got some great replay analysis that you've done in your prep work here in the document, which is great. I think what I really want us to push for, though, is we want to push more aggressively into the next step. So in this case, for today, we've identified one of the problems is, okay, we're not sure when to attack against Protoss, right? So we're going to start with that, maybe some early aggression as well. And we want to try to look at, okay, well, what do we think just off the top of our head is something that could work really well in that scenario? You know, what is an idea off the top of our head, not knowing 100% sure if it's right or not, that could solve that problem? And trying to just be more aggressive at fixing that. Same thing with, like, obviously defending early pressures, not just saying, okay, I'm not sure how to defend early pressures, but I'd like you to be trying to make the next step as well and going, okay, this is the problem. This is how we solve it. And I know you've been doing this somewhat, but we want to try and just work on that and try and grind that skill up into the next step of defining reactions so we can refine it. So I guess we'll start out obviously with a very aggressive replay and we get to focus on that first of all. So with this in mind, let's make a nice little subheading here. And I guess we will just put this down below TVP. I mean, okay, I'll just do it from the top, actually, to the bottom the way we normally do. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So TVP, replay versus Ducal on Triton. Early aggression. All right, so you've mentioned you struggle against early aggressive plays and that sort of stuff. So right now you're doing a Widowmine drop in TVP, and you're struggling with a lot of early aggression. So what do you think are some of the key problems here, or what are some things we can do to fix it? What are your first thoughts on what the changes should be with your build order or your reactions or whatnot that could make the play easier or better for you?
Actually, I thought with every time in TVP I start like in TVT with the bunker, and I thought it's like the safest option I could take. But this replay showed me, or this game showed me, that it's not safe enough, or probably my reaction wasn't the right reaction.
Okay, so fast bunker is what you've started with, but here's an example where it didn't work out. Okay, so I mean that solves some of the issues, I'm sure, having a nice fast bunker at the natural. And are you always building it at the same time? Is this the exact moment you just build it at this moment every game? Yeah.
In this replay, not, because the SUV was already out there. Normally, the bunker gets built by the SUV that builds the second depot.
Okay, so naturally that
This
starts...
was actually even earlier.
Okay, so normally it starts at about 220, 230, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so fast bunker always starts at 230. Okay. All right, so in terms of this specific response, we're looking at it, it didn't work out. What's the first thing you go back and double check when you get caught out by something aggressive like this? How do you kind of check that you did everything correctly in this replay?
Well, first of all, I try to remember which I identified in the game as big mistakes I made. Like this time, I built a Widow Mine instead of a Cyclone.
Right.
Because in my mind, Cyclone is the best reaction, because it's not as static as a tank. But I don't know why I actually built the mine. Probably I just thought it's quicker out, and underestimated the pressure he made.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's one thing. There is another one which we've got to always remember in cheese scenarios, right? We've also got to remember some golden rules. Golden rule of any early defense is double check all the basics, right? So the biggest one with that is barracks, timing, and production is one of the biggest things against any of these early attacks. If you had, 2 more Marines out a bit earlier, it can make a big difference, right? So let's go right back to the start. And this is something you should never stop checking. And I still check in my games. Whenever I find a rush seems to just upset my flow and my rhythm more than I feel it should, I'm like, what the fuck just happened? And I always want to check, did my depot go down on time? Did my barracks go down on time? So we're just going to double check that build. And this is something you really want to make that a habit. Perfect depot timing. And you can just 8 times it, and we can slow it down as that finishes. Do we go straight into the barracks? Great. So you can tell me if you see any issues here.
Hell, I'm losing the SUV.
Okay.
Obviously, in this situation, I guess I should have pulled the SUV earlier. But if I have pulled it earlier, I didn't have the other SUV right on time so the Rex would have been delayed more if I pulled it straight away.
So what do you think is the better response here? Let's go through this and what can we do here to systematize it and make it a little bit better for you?
I mean, probably pull it now. I mean, I get like 3, 4, 5, too many hits on it. So and now I waste energy on pulling it away.
And we're also missing SCV production right now as well, which is what's hurting us. So my replay interface is bugged, so it's showing every single unit as having 1500 hit points, which is interesting. There we go, now it's fixed. Okay. No, it isn't. Now it says they all have 15. Jesus. Anyways, that's what I get for having the WCS interface on. So anyways, basically, all right. So you think you should pull that SCV a bit faster. Now, do you keep an SCV control group to bring over there, or you just kind of do it manually? Either way is fine. I think you pulled it pretty quickly, right? So why not swap it off, immediately, and then put that first one we pulled over on the barracks, right? So we should just do that, if we need to. So we can do that. as you said. Okay, so probe harass. The other thing is sometimes this happens. Like your SCV stayed in a bad position, popped out and kind of got blocked by the probe, had to mineral walk, got another hit or two on it. So, but this is easily solved if we just pull that SCV faster. Pull SCV faster and swap off. We also need to keep building SCVs here during that pressure. Now, at this point, what could you have done differently to keep this SCV alive and also distract yourself a little less?
Oh. Well, I could try to surround the probe with other SUVs, but this would take...
You just repair.
Ah, yeah.
That's what we always forget. This is something like I've even started finally doing this against like oracles. If an oracle comes in a mineral line now, I sometimes will just grab the SCV. Well, not an oracle. I don't know. I think it can save you an extra hit on an oracle, but against like banshees, for instance, when they come in my mineral line, I'll quickly go and start like repairing each other with the SCVs, and sometimes you can buy yourself quite a few lives. But just repair, because if you get a single repair drill on that SCV, it's going to take 2 probe hits. So you can just get it in the middle of your mineral line, tell an SCV to repair it, and then if the probe comes in, obviously you can just tell 2 SCVs to attack it. It has to run away. If it actually goes for your SCV, you can pull more workers to attack it, and at least it'll be a trade at the very worst. But usually you'll kill that probe and keep your SCV alive if you do that properly. So just remember that you can repair if you get down to 1 hit. Repair in your mineral line. In mineral line plus pull 2 more SCVs to scare off the probe. So if you think about it, the probe is going to come in, you pull these 2 SCVs, they attack it once. It's just going to run away if it wants to survive, right? And then you immediately put those 2 SCVs back on minerals, right? You're not like pull 7 SCVs, A move it, chase it halfway around your base. Having a tiny bit of mining distraction there, not the end of the world. So you just repair that SCV, just a few hit points, get up to 10 or 15 hit points, and you just go back to mining with those workers and you'll be fine. So that's like a small thing. I don't think this lost you this game or anything. Just an annoyance, right? But always good to break that down in a little bit more detail. But let's go back to that barracks. Let's remember what we were focusing on. Golden rule of any early defense, double check the basics. So the barracks, does that Reaper start straight away? So tell me what you think with this barracks production.
Command center upgrade.
Didn't saw an issue. Reaper started right away. The Marine now got delayed. Normally I built the Marine after that for the bunker, and now takes too much time.
So how many seconds was that? How many seconds do you think that
5,
was?
6, 7.
I think that was about 10. Let's check. Let's check. It's really good to check because this gives us a much better idea of what's going on. Yeah, about 202, 203. And then it starts up when?
And
211. It's about 9 seconds maybe, right?
yeah.
Okay, cool. So that is 1 Marine less, right? Because it's 18 seconds for 2 Marines once the reactor's done. So that's 1 less Marine. Now let's check it again. Do we get the reactor straight away? That was pretty quick, right? So not too bad. Could have been slightly faster though, right? That would have been real nice. Okay, cool. So at this point, we know that we're 1 Marine short, right? Basically, the next 2 Marines will both be 9 seconds late. Is another way to look at it, right? So that's something we should know because that does make a difference in these scenarios, right? So that's something you've always got to double check: is did I hit my build super tight? Because even if you're in Platinum League, which you're a Diamond player, we would say first 3 minutes of the game, yeah, there's a probe being slightly annoying, but no other real interaction. No reason that has to be late. I reckon we can hit that every time, right? So the other thing you said was you want to go straight tech lab on the factory, straight into a cyclone, right?
Yeah, in this scenario.
Yeah.
I guess that's
Cool. Yeah, one thing you can do is like if your Marines are out a bit fast, you could pull SCVs, like 8 SCVs, and just try to surround these stalkers. I sometimes enjoy doing that sort of maneuver, especially if they're going up the ramp and being, pushing on there, try to drill through and get them. But let's just swap to the other focus for now. Let's imagine these Marines are out just a little bit earlier. So one little trick, whenever you're in this barracks placement, notice how this happens with the Marines. So a little trick. If you know you're in this sort of scenario, you actually want to queue a Marine, wait 2 seconds, then queue the other Marine. So that it has space to get out of the exit rally point, clear that area, and then the other Marine can pop. Just wait like 1 full second between the 2 Marines, as long as they're not queued at the same time. Because what's happening, right, is your rally point is on the outside and on this diagonal where there's only a single space. The Marine pops out, the barracks says, oh, space is occupied, and then it just pops it out on the bottom left of the barracks, which is like the default spawn location, which is obviously we don't want that Marine. And it's really frustrating. So this is something, for the first time, I actually consciously thought about this. Both with Widow Mines, I do it as well. If I'm building Widow Mines on this factory and there's like Ravagers coming in, I don't want those Widow Mines to pop at the exact same time against Ravager Ling, because one will pop on the outside. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. It's one of these just tiny, tiny little tidbits, right? Don't queue Marines, mines at exact same time. I'm not even going to write that down. You can remember that. That's something that doesn't belong in our notes. It's too minute. All right, so you'd go fast bunker, or is it 230? So faster Marine. Don't get distracted by probe, right? And then you would go straight for a mine. Nope, tech lab into Cyclone. And otherwise continue your build. All right, so if we'd done that, our tech lab takes about the same time as a Widow Mine, I believe. And then we were building a Cyclone now. So we would still lose the depot if we don't pull SCVs, right?
Yeah.
So it would be rough. Like, the Widow Mine does actually protect your ramp really well. It does serve a function, and I'm a big fan of it in this scenario. Because I actually like the Widow Mine just as the fastest thing possible to stop them running up your ramp, right? And so we try to run a Marine to the ramp, which is unfortunately
Yeah,
not
at the
right
moment
move.
I pulled it, I knew it was dumb.
So this is, you know, difficult to deal with, and we're taking damage. Let's put this in context. So this feels like, wait, should this ever happen? Should we ever, with our build that's meant to be safe with a quick bunker, be taking this damage? Let's put this in context. You are skipping your SCV scout every game, right?
Yep.
And you're up against, what was his opening build order? Do you remember? You can take a glance at it, his base now, and you can kind of see.
Yeah, I just remember scouting Cybercore on 2 gates and 2 gases.
Yeah, so really late expansion, right? That expansion still isn't finished for your opponent, right? And the tech is really late as well. Normally their first tech structure, often normal expand build, starts at like 220, finishes about 3 minutes, 310, no later than 330. This robo is finishing at like 420, 415. It's really late, right? So this is a big commitment from your opponents. This is a very oddball build order that happens to do very, very well against what you're doing, right? So let's look at this and say, okay, well, this is kind of, all right, my opponent's gone really quite aggressive here. Having a few Marines up earlier, I think going Widow Mine into Cyclone is totally fine, but it's up to you. Pig prefers Mine straight into Cyclone, but your choice. I do think if you keep those Marines on top of the ramp and you get them on time, you get 2 Marines, then another 2 Marines, you can usually just kind of hold the high ground, especially just pull a few SCVs to fight if you have to. But let's go right back to the very start and let's double check. So with this opening of build orders, because you're playing blind, we're accepting there are certain builds against any blind build we're not going to be able to react to, right, until the last second. That's okay because you get a bit more money. So looking at what's going on in this game, you come in with your Reaper, you kind of see what's going on. Is there something more you could have done with this Reaper?
Check is natural.
So we go sit in the middle of the map with it, and it does go down. Is your opponent playing honest right now? Go look at your opponent's base. So if that Reaper went back in, what's he got?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Well, probably the next doggo that pops out, but let's say 1, 2, 3 probe kills.
Well, there's actually nothing building. So you could have jumped in. It takes a long time for a Stalker to build. He doesn't even have recall energy, but even if you force a recall, that's a win, right?
Yeah.
So I would actually never have gone to the watchtower, or I would have shift clicked the tower and then back to the jump in point with my Reaper. But I basically would have just gone back in at some point and just clicked it into the main mineral line. Whenever a Protoss is being really aggressive, whether it's off a proxy robo, proxy Stargate, 2-gate, generally they like to just run everything across the map and be a dickhead. And the Reaper has to either run home and get in your bunker and add some firepower, or it needs to punish and try to get in their mineral line. And if they don't build any units, that Reaper destroys their already shitty small economy. Like, it does big damage. It's actually insane. If it kills 4 or 5 probes, sometimes it kills more than that. Sometimes it, like, wins the game, basically. Because their economy is so small, it can't absorb a lot of losses, right? So this is something we want to put in our mindset here, is this is a very abnormal build from our opponent. But let's, like, look at every resource and think about it. So what do you think is your preferred option? Do you think you prefer to get the Reaper home, which is obviously easier to micro a little bit, but when your opponent's being a douchebag like Ducal here and leaving nothing at home, you do miss a big opportunity. So the important thing is, like, also let's just take one step back. What are we doing right now? We are analyzing every tiny detail. If you were scouting, we could maybe be a little bit rougher and say, we scout 2-gate, just pull the CC to the high ground, build a bunker on the high ground, and re-expand only later after we have a cyclone out. Right? Because we don't have that information, you're playing blind. We're kind of like, okay, what is the exact response that we're going to execute every time we see Stalkers rock up at our natural really fast, or we see those 2 gateways? So which one do you prefer? Aggressive or defensive Reaper?
Aggressive.
All right, aggressive. I love aggressive. I think it's what's hilarious. First time you do it, you'll get it surrounded by probes. It'll kill 1 or 2 probes. And you'll be like, fuck, I'm a dummy. But then there's the time where you remember to pull it back and there's a whole mineral line chasing your Reaper and you just click it out of the base. Then you go back, do some macro, and you jump it back in and kill another 2 or 3 probes, and all the probes chase you again. And you're like, oh my God, this is so huge. Because even just wasting mining time is massive, right? And the fact you got a probe here was great, by the way. That was awesome. So I love that idea of just leave the Reaper hanging out here. Come back in when he's back at full life 20 seconds from now after you've done all your macro tasks. I think that's awesome. All right, so we've got a really good idea. So we're saying, okay, fast marine. You're saying cyclone. I've got my note saying, I think you could go mine into cyclone, but we'll see. Reaper stays ready to jump back in and punish if nothing's at home. That's a really cool move that's going to make a big difference, right? Now, the other thing here is, what about perspective-wise? What's ahead, what's behind? This is still an awkward, shitty scenario, right? I can sense you feel uncomfortable. I know I'd feel uncomfortable if I'm letting 4 Stalkers walk in my natural and be dickheads, right? This is frustrating to deal with. Even if we've got those Marines up a little bit earlier, and we would pull those Marines back. Remember, if they were already out, they would be already out 9 seconds ago, and we would be halfway built the next 2. So even if those Marines were out, we'd pull them back. We can't fight 2 Stalkers with 2 Marines. We'd have to wait for the mine to pop, burrow it, and then we can get those Marines back to the ramp, right? But even then, we're going to have to evacuate the command center. You might even want to sell the bunker if they try to fight it, right? Because it's up to you. But it's awkward. It's uncomfortable. If we're looking at this through our standard lens of this is a normal TVP, this is a normal macro Protoss, we feel drastically behind and like throwing in the towel, and we feel like shit immediately, right? So, I mean, what is your gauge here? How much damage can you take? What, like, before you fall behind? Because remember, this is not a normal Protoss opening. It's a terrible follow-up for the Protoss. Like, very slow, right? Even without the Reaper doing damage. So how do you change your internal marker? What do you think is too much damage here? What are you trying to stop? Where are you trying to contain it?
Not sure. I think I could pull 5 SUVs to fight with it, but everything above it is, I guess I'm too much behind.
So sorry, you're saying you could pull SUVs, but what is the maximum amount you can lose here, though, is what we're getting at. Not what can we do to respond. Is it okay to lose your command center, first of all? Do you think it's okay to lose that and just rebuild it?
No.
Okay, so we want to keep CC alive. Do we need to hold the low ground?
No.
Do we need to hold low ground? No. Okay, so that immediately tells us after orbital is made, immediately lift, right? Even before they force. Immediately mule main and lift, right? Okay, cool. So in that case, all we need to do is hold the high ground, right? It's okay to lose the bunker, the marine. Do we need to keep the depots alive at the ramp? Can we lose?
Yeah.
If we lose one depot, do you think we're behind or ahead?
No, we are blocked. So would say we are behind if we lose one.
Ready for dust off.
I would disagree. I would think one is actually totally okay. I think we might want to try to defend it. If we think we can keep both depots alive, obviously we'd like to do it. But I think even if we lose it, it's not too bad. It's actually totally fine. Because remember how his expansion is just not that clean, right? You got double mules dropping. You're going to have some nice tech units out. And remember, the Protoss's tech is much more delayed. So your Protoss runner isn't going to have quick oracles running around to follow up and harass. They're not going to have a quick blink or a quick prism necessarily, right? Everything is delayed for them in terms of tech as well. So I think it's actually totally okay to lose one depot. Okay to lose one depot. But we will fight to try and protect our wall and keep it up. So that's something we're drawing the line at. I want to defend all of my high ground. That's basically what you're choosing, right? We wanted to defend the high ground. Okay, cool. So, I mean, there's a few options here. Obviously, having the Marines early, like we talked about, that solves so much in of itself, like I said, right? And if we get a mine or a faster cyclone, I think the mine itself, plus those Marines is enough. We could build a bunker on the high ground. Personally, I don't think that's necessary. I don't think we even need to do that, right? And I don't think we need to pull SCVs other than maybe to repair the depots early on to do that. We'll have to encounter different scenarios and see how it plays out. But for now, basically what we're changing is we're just going to lift to the high ground. Our Reaper will backstab. We're going to try the early Cyclone because you prefer that and try it. That's fine. The Cyclone being out earlier, it shuts it down, right? The Widowmine buys you time. Cyclone starts to just pick off a Stalker, pick off a Stalker. It's like really good for that, yeah? We did see one downside of the Cyclone, though, right? Where you went down, he just pulled the Stalker out of range while shooting with the other Stalkers, and it couldn't really break down quite as powerfully as a siege tank could in terms of a bit more micro-sensitive and that sort of stuff. So there's different choices there. We'll kind of have to choose, okay, maybe I should just micro better with my Cyclone. Maybe it's something else. It's going to be up to you, right? So what do you think? Do you think this is enough of a game plan? Do you think this changes the scenario enough? Or do you think you need some more details? Do you want to build a bunker on the high ground as soon as you see the first Stalkers in the 2 gateway? Like, what do you want to do?
Hard to judge, actually. I guess getting the build a little bit sharper and cleaner, then I should be okay.
Yeah. I think, remember, you're not going to be 100%, right? We're going to learn as we go and as we experience this. Because I could tell you if you just hit perfectly how to defend this, but we're not always going to play 100% perfect micro, are we, right? We need to find what works for us on average and what works against the players we're playing as well. So I think already just having more of a clear game plan here is the biggest thing, right? So remember when we first loaded up this replay, your analysis was I should have got the Cyclone quicker. And that was about where it started and ended. And already we figured out your Reaper could have killed a ton of economy in his side of the map, number one. Number two, your Marines could have been a lot faster. We were loose on our build order, and we didn't have it built into our kind of execution to double check that. So that's something really big, right? We know to check that in future, okay? The other thing was just saying, okay, well, where's the boundary? What are we trying to achieve in this scenario? Are we giving up the low ground, or are we trying to fight for it? And I think we've decided to just pull up to the high ground. So when should we move back to the low ground? And how should we retake that? How do you think you'll focus on that next time?
I guess the easiest thing is build first a Cyclone, second a tank. And with the tank, I guess it's kind of easy to gain control.
So your Cyclone can go down and poke away on its own. What you were doing with the Cyclone was absolutely correct at first. But what are these 2 SCVs, these 4 Marines doing? Nothing, right? And this is very common. I do the exact same mistake. I'm like, I want to go down and retake it and build a bunker and stuff. But those units aren't as mobile. All they're going to do is get the Cyclone stuck on them and stop it from retreating, right? The Cyclone, nice move. It can poke in, poke up, poke in, poke up. But there is no need to move any other units down there. The Widowmine was okay in this scenario, but you're going to do it without a Widowmine. And then you're just going to siege your tank on the edge of the high ground as well to give it even more punishment if those Stalkers try to chase the Cyclone, right? So that seems pretty simple. Cyclone pokes away on its own. tank sieges up on edge, and you just poke them out, right? Then retake natural and build bunker. That seems simple enough, right? Pretty simple plan. Leave everything on the high ground. Cyclone goes in, tries to pick off stalkers, backing up. Just make sure if you ever take damage, you don't go back down like this. Like going back down on yellow hit points is something a lot of players do. I did this the other day, last week, and I got really annoyed at myself. You go back up and you repair that cyclone if it takes this much damage, but you never want to take this much damage in the first place, preferably. Always repair and be conservative with the cyclone. It's more important at this point for you to be hitting depots, extra barracks, production, all that sort of shit, than it is for you to try and get one extra lock-on tick on your cyclone, right? Because, like, if we look at this, like, you could have been going extra barracks or something at this point, but instead you're microing the cyclone, and it actually doesn't achieve anything. And I found the exact same pattern with my play. Like, these Marines, they make you think it's a bit safer. It's not. All they're going to do is block that cyclone from retreating half the time. And the Marines do nothing against the stalkers on their own. Obviously, that was a disaster. Really cute hallucination drag on the mine. But we were already running back and forwards in this awkward scenario where, like, how are we going to beat that army with what we had? The Marines and the SCVs can't be there in range of those stalkers and sentries. They're just going to get focused down. He can just pull back the stalker that gets locked on. This is the easiest good trade situation for him. So we can look at that and go, you fucking dummy. You fucking dummy. You didn't fucking micro it. And like, or we can say, wait. Why was I putting myself in a silly position in the first place? Okay, it's because I didn't have a game plan. So now you've got that game plan. Anything you want to add? You see there in the document, it says retake high ground, cyclone pokes away, always repair it, tank sieges on the edge. Any other details? Do you immediately put a bunker on the low ground? What do we do there?
What?
Like when you retake the natural, is there any is there any other insurance? Are you putting turrets down because you're worried about stuff? Like what else? Are you moving the Marines down when you have 10 Marines? Like if they really refuse to leave and they keep just sitting behind the gases, do we like move our tank to the low ground or wait for a second tank? If they're like really committing, are there any other details? I mean, you can just leave it as is, but I just want you to define things because the big thing we need to do more and more is define so that we can refine it.
I wonder if it if the only priority is to retake the low ground, of course, but could I or should I also like what is it build a Banshee or drop 1 or 2 mines if I get the time to produce them into his natural, or should I just focus on retaking the low ground?
Okay, so counter pressure. After you've dealt with aggression, it's always nice to go do counter pressure, right? I mean, you should only do that after you've retaken the low ground, surely, I would say, right? Definitely, if they're really hanging around, maybe at some point you can send a drop. But we got to clearly define that. So you're saying maybe I should do a Widowmine drop, maybe I should do a Banshee. Well, what's your normal pressure that you prefer to do there? What's the one you prefer? What do you? If you intuitively think Banshee's better, you can choose that. But which one do you want to go with? And the important thing here is to just choose one and say, cool, let's do that. So first steps first, what counter pressure do you want to do? Which one?
I prefer mines.
Okay, so you want to do a mine drop? Okay. So we don't want to rush that out before we retake the natural. Retaking the natural is the most important thing, right? But we want to do it soon after. So how would you choose as a marker? When do you go for that mine drop?
I would say if I landed my natural.
Okay.
Like on low ground.
Okay, so the thing is, you need to build towards it a bit earlier, right? If you're going to go for it. So do we just go straight into mines in the medevac once we've got 1 tank out after that cyclone?
Yeah, it all depends on how much pressure he does and how committed he is.
Okay, so whenever you're not sure what's happening, remember we still need to make a plan, right? We need to visualize. So let's start with this sort of pressure that he did. So how much pressure do you think it is that he put on this game? How would you define this? Is this super crazy pressure? Is this very light?
Well, he got his natural, so...
Well, how much has he actually committed to your side of the map?
Everything of his army.
Yeah, but and I mean like actual unit count? Like what is his army? If we look at this, it's 4 stalkers from the early game. And then 2 sentries. That's it. There is nothing else. So he's committed nothing other than his first 4 stalkers, which was his opening pressure, essentially. He decided to bring some sentries. That doesn't really do anything, right? Obviously, there's force field potential, but, you know, got a tank on the high ground and a cyclone, technically. This is super light pressure. It's just that, obviously, we lost our units early, so it spiraled out of control. Let's imagine it's always just the starting pressure, and then they go hard macro behind it, like your opponent did. Chronoing probes, adding tech, upgrades, all this sort of stuff. So let's take this as the baseline. Remember, whenever you want to come up with a response, don't be sucked into saying, well, I'm not sure. If he does this, I might do one thing, I might do another thing. Define one of them, choose that as your baseline, and then we can learn the reactions off that. But we've got to make this defined, okay? So let's imagine we've got that defense. Is the cyclone and the tank fast enough? Do we go straight into the mines and the medevac after that?
I would say so.
Okay, so we're going to go medevac as the first unit on the starport. Do we swap the factory back onto the reactor to get mines out quickly enough? Because if we're building a cyclone and then a tank, I mean, your medevac's going to be out far before mines are going to build out one at a time, right? Okay. So yeah, so talk us through. What do you think you're going to do to make that mine drop happen?
I would just stick to producing them from the factory with tech lab on.
Okay. If we think about that, though, timing-wise, that's not going to line up. Because if we go Cyclone in this game, say we started the tank immediately, obviously your timings were slow here, that medevac's going to be out at about 440. It should even be earlier, depending on how clean the opening is, right? And you're going to have your tank popping out about the same time as the medevac, and you haven't even started Widow Mines. So we need to either change the build order or change the pressure. What do you reckon? So we can either swap the factory onto the reactor, build 2 mines, send it across, or we can simply go for a marine drop, or we can simply go for a Banshee off the starport or a Liberator. What do you reckon?
Then I would go for the swap.
Okay, so we're gonna swap over, and do we want to go for a 2 mine or a 4 mine drop?
2.
All right, we're gonna do a 2 mine drop. Okay, cool. Awesome, man. So, I mean, I'm going to add my own little bit of detail to that and say I still think it's going to be slow. So, why don't we just get a Viking as well? And then we can land a Viking in the natural Widow Mine, drop the main. So we hit both mineral lines. Yeah? Okay. So, to do that, Starport goes Viking first, then Medevac. So we can hit both mineral lines. Okay. All right, so now you've defined the counter pressure. Okay, we've got that. What about the build order? Ignore what's happening in this replay at your natural. You're getting destroyed, right? But what should the follow-up always be? You're defending the pressure. You're going to retake your low ground. Do we just follow? Do we go back to our normal build order? Do we change things for a certain reason? In this replay, you went 3 command centers. You felt like you needed to catch up economically. But what's your normal build order? Should you do that or should you change it up? What should be your game plan here after this modified opening?
I'm not sure, actually.
Choose. That's what we got to do. Just choose. Off the top of your head, what do you think's a good idea? And we can discuss it. So this is the best thing. Whenever you're unsure, just say, okay, what if I chose this? So choose a direction, and then we can think about some of the details afterwards. But it's so important to just decisively say, I think this is good.
Well, always comes to my mind. I don't know how base looks on the other side. If he goes macro, then yeah, it's.
So if he goes macro, are you saying if he goes macro, you want the 3rd command center? If he goes aggressive, you want the barracks? Is that what you're thinking?
No, if he goes macro, I would attack out of 3 bases. Like, don't know, add 2 barracks, and go.
Okay.
I got enough.
But you can't reliably get that information, right? Even with the counter pressure, it's going to hit quite a bit later. It's hard for you to get info. Like, if you're lucky, you'll have a Reaper and SCV, you can get more of an idea. So, once again, we're at a crossroads. So this is the big thing I wanted to get at today. And this is the big piece of homework, which I'm going to write up the very, very top here, okay? So the biggest thing, homework for today, and this is what I want you to focus on so hard for the next week, is we need to make a decision, okay? So let's just choose one. And which one do you think is most solid? And that you might be like, I like this against that against that. If that's the case, what do you think you face more? Macro or aggression from the Protoss? And whichever one's higher, we'll choose that as our baseline.
I think it's 50-50. That's the problem.
Then just choose one.
I prefer attacking.
You prefer attacking. Okay.
Yeah.
So we need to make a decision. Every problem, just make a decision. You know what? Even if it was 30% of the time the correct decision, you will get way more success from making that decision quickly, decisively, and fast. This is the biggest thing that will totally modify your mindset, okay? So next time you're in a scenario like this, it's so easy to say, I'm not sure if I should do this or that. Just choose one, define, and then we can refine it. And even if it wasn't the correct exact response, what's way better is we're going to play better because we know what we're doing. And if it turns out to really be a fucking terrible decision, we can change it. But I can tell you, even at GM, you get players who make the wrong decision a lot because they're decisive and they execute well enough. Bam, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that they made a slightly suboptimal decision because their execution is on point, right? So we need to make the game easier for ourselves decision-making wise. We've got to stop letting ourselves get thrown off by this huge array of choices, and we've got to make that. So rather than going for this third CC, what is the next step? You said second and third barracks. Do we just do our normal build order from here? I mean, obviously the timings are off, but I mean, we can probably just do our exact normal build order as 2 and 3 barracks right now, yeah?
Yeah, but normally I would drop the third, and if I want to go for attacking out of from 2 bases, I don't need the third, or not.
Yeah, but the order of the second and third barracks stays the same, right?
Yeah.
So what's the next part of the build order here? Off the top of your head right now, without looking at your build order, imagine that third command center didn't go down. Talk me through, what are the most important next things in this build order?
Normally I would drop 2 E-base and 2 racks.
What goes down first? E-bays or barracks?
E-base.
So you go 2 E-bays and then second and third racks. All right.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem. Okay, so this is where we're losing too much momentum in this matchup. Going fast upgrades is nice, but you're not going to be able to attack. I saw the third CC and the 2 E-bays here. You can only really do 3cc double eBay if you're doing one of these openings where you're like running Hellions in and then doing like cloaked banshees. You're basically hitting them with really hard, fast, crazy harassment and trying to do a ton of damage because you're not going to have any bio upgrades for such a long time, and you're going to give the Protoss so much time to chrono boost probes and make upgrades and Colossus and stuff. So this is really good. We've figured this out because you swap back to this sort of build order, this mine opening, and we haven't really worked on it together much. That's huge. That's why we've been losing so much momentum in this matchup. That second and third barracks is the most important thing in any standard TVP. And I've even started doing Widow Mine drop just because I've been like, let's do the standard Widow Mine drop into 3 barracks. This is the most standard way people play right now. So little tip, we need to change that around. Second and third barracks. We also, if we're doing a 2-base push, I mean, in general, we only want a single eBay, even if we're doing a macro play, actually. So that's something else as well, because the attack upgrade is so much more important than the armor. And we just want to make sure we get up more bio and medevacs and mines or tanks, depending on what we're focused on. And then we can add the upgrades a little bit later. So second and third barracks, 1 eBay is very normal. A third gas geyser is very normal. Do we want to go third CC after that and then go, we'll get the third command center, the second engineering bay, and then go up to 4 and 5 barracks? Or do we want to just go 2 base all in? Which one is our standard TVP? And we should know this before the game starts, right? We can learn when to react, but what do you think should be the standard? So let's just say go back to standard build. Go back to standard build, and let's now define that standard build. TVP progression after mine drop. Okay, cool. From there, it's either 2 base follow-up, which is going to be 4th and 5th racks, which I'm enjoying at the moment. No add-ons, and just all in. Pull boys, etc. Or there's the macro follow-up. So I'm writing these both up so you can choose, but I want you to right now go in there. In the document where I've written all that, I want you to write down next to one of those, this is the standard. And the important thing, once again, is making a choice. So decisiveness. In the face of overwhelming options, we can't be paralyzed by fear. We just need to make a decision. and both of them are correct. That's the thing. That's the big thing with StarCraft. It's so much more about which one we are improving at becomes the best option, right? So as soon as we choose one, that immediately becomes the right choice because we start practicing it and getting better at that than the other option. So we've got to focus on that over the strategic, how to counter our opponent. That comes later. So what appeals to you more, my friend?
I'm not sure when should I attack with the first and fourth racks without add-ons and how many SUVs to pull.
How do we define that? Okay, cool. So personally, we've also got to choose what your standard unit would be. If you were doing a 2-base push, would you like to do it with mines or tanks? Tanks are better versus Colossus, mines are better versus Zealots. Both can work versus anything. Because tanks are really nice at like just sieging up and you can, kite the Zealots from far away back to your tanks. Mines can also wreck Colossus because they're not as mobile. And if you start hitting multiple mineral lines or you get between their base and they've got to fight through the mines back into your army, it's really hard for them to actually stop you just wrecking them as well. So both can work. It's just a matter of flavor. Mines or tanks, what do you like? Decisive. Go with your instincts.
Yeah.
Trust your instincts. What feels better, to fuck people up with tanks or mines? That's it.
It's pretty balanced. The thing about mines is when they shoot, they can't shoot anymore for a certain amount of time. So I guess I would go for tanks.
Okay, we'll go for tanks. They can keep shooting, so if you hold the position and the tanks never go down, you do tend to fuck people up pretty hard. That's true. The weakness with tanks, of course, is they're a bit less mobile. If you get jumped on, when they're not quite sieged up, or if they go down in the first fight, you're like, fuck. That's fine. There's ups and downs to everything, but we've chosen one. That's the biggest part. We're going to do a tank push. So how do you want to define when that push hits? What do you think right now? You said, when would I push with that? I want you to write it down. There in the document below tanks, write down, maybe it's 30 Marines, maybe it's having your upgrades, maybe it's having 3 tanks, maybe it's having 2 tanks, maybe it's having 4 tanks. Choose a few things that you would want before you attack and just write that down there as when to attack.
God damn it.
And what's great here is everything's flexible in StarCraft. This is the hardest bit, is committing to a decision. But once you just make it you define it, you just write some shit down, we can always change it. It can always change. And that's part of the constant review process that is inherent to us as StarCraft players. Like, if we want to be a good StarCraft player, it is all about review, constantly, how can I do this better? How can I rework my understanding of this and all that sort of stuff. All right, stim, shields, +1. Yeah, these are all good things. Awesome. Stim shields +1, is that it? Are we adding more, or how are we going?
Can't think about I can't really think about what takes how long to build, and
Just estimate. Just go. So you got to fight that urge to be right. See, this is one of the big issues you have. It's what makes you very precise as a player. What makes a lot of your replay analysis great. You identify problems so systematically because it's very clear. This was a mistake. This was a good thing. This was a bad thing. This was a good thing. What's not as clear and obvious, what's not as binary is what is the exact correct push. So right now, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about tank count? Are you thinking about medevac count? What are you thinking about?
at the moment, how many tanks I should have?
What's the first number that pops to mind that you think will line up with that?
2.
2? Write it down.
Yeah.
Don't second guess yourself. Write it down. Anything else we wanted to find there?
I don't know how many medivacs I can have at that time. So
Guess. First number that pops to mind. Write it down. Okay. Awesome. So this is like a fast push out, kind of we're pushing out probably even before stim shields and +1 is finished. Moving across the map, 2 tanks, 2 medivacs. I know that. I get the comfort of knowing that. If I wasn't here to tell you that, defining it here would still be perfect. Why? Because then you play a game or two and you're like, look at the replay and you're like, well, actually this is a really fast push and this one bit doesn't line up or that bit doesn't line up. So I'm going to tell you the tank push is a bit more decisive and a bit more committed. Okay. So with the tank push, I would say we can definitely start with that. Absolutely. So, this is a bit of a faster push, but is great. Just rally across the map and make sure you bring, if you're doing tanks, make sure you bring like 6 SCVs on auto repair to repair tanks and build bunkers. And the idea is to get sieged up out front their third or their natural and to just leapfrog forward and keep building bunkers and stuff, okay? And the idea there is because we don't want to overcommit. With just 2 tanks, our army's not actually that big. Don't go too deep until we have a third tank and a bit more bio. Especially like verse charge. These are all advanced points you don't need to think about until you get good at it. However, if they're going Storm, Double Forge, 70 probes, you can just stim in and win the game. And that is something which happens a lot on the ladder, man. There are some Protoss players out there who are just like, I will roll the dice and hope my opponent does not assault me before I get 2/2, 3 Colossus, and 6 High Templar with Psystorm. So, there are these inherent reactions within the timing that can happen where you're like, oh, I scanned ahead. I saw. So we're going to write some notes, okay? Stim, Marine, or scan ahead. Verse Mass Zealot, more care, right? If you see 20 Zealots, you might even go home, wait for a few more rounds of production, pull all your SCVs, and then go, right? That might be something you need to work in your own reactions, right? You can write those out. But because we've already got a clear, defined moment to move out, we're looking for that opening. Verse no defense, push right into range of Nexus, and, siege up, start bunkers. Visualize is something that's really good. Visualize where your best tanks are, best tank spots are before you push. Spread them if possible, but it depends on position. Bio wants to be in line or behind tanks versus Colossus Splash. It wants to be way out front versus Zealot Charge, so you can kite back and the Zealots aren't able to jump straight on the tanks, right? Do you understand that theory, that idea of kind of how you're forcing the engagements, where the idea is the bio's in front of the tanks, the Zealots charge them, you stim and you start a step backwards, and they're out of charge and they're kind of walking up to the siege tanks and the bio, right? Whereas if you're behind the tanks, they'll charge on the tanks, all your tanks are gone, and they can just disengage and pull back, and you're like, fuck, I just lost my artillery.
how about the bio composition? More Marines or Marines, I don't know.
Just the standard stuff. You can definitely go more Marine heavy because they're better versus Zealots and with more tanks. You could go for a second reactor to adapt this. I would stick to the exact same production I normally go. 2 Tech Labs, 1 reactor, 2 Marauders, and a thing. Now, if they go super heavy Zealot, definitely the Marines are a little bit better, right? But the reason I like this is I can then plug and play this exact same opening with no changes into the macro follow-up. No change. It's just, it doesn't change until that point where instead of going a 4th and 5th racks, I put a 3rd CC down. And I still do a bit of a stim bio pressure, but there's no tanks with it. It's just the bio and the medevac, so I can pick up and boost away if I get in trouble. So what you're doing is you're creating an opening that will perfectly transition into a macro build. So all your practice on doing a 2-base all-in with this is going to work just as well for like that first 4-5 minutes, exactly the same for a macro game start. That's really cool. If we can plug and play, that practice is worth so much more to us. So are you digging the 2-base all in as the plan here? The timing attack plan?
Yeah, I have to try. Never really played an all in. Okay, the 3 racks whoop could kind of be an all in, but
this one's actually, really committed, and you can make it so much better with so many tiny details. Okay, benchmark that push is going to be the biggest thing. Now, we didn't get time to cover TVT today, but I think there's some stuff from today that is so much more important. So go back to the top of your document, and if there's one thing we can take from today, it's a decision making. It's clear, decisive decision making, and it can be stressful, but we've got to just fight the urge to obsess over making the right decision. We've got to remember the right decision is always not really a thing. What's more important is refining an option, first of all, okay? And I think you could speed along your process, because at the moment, I think what's happening is sometimes you're focusing so much on choosing the right one, you're not fully exploring it. Whereas if you just say, okay, I'm 50-50, I don't really know, just choose one. So every time you find yourself in a moment of indecision, say, let's just choose this. 50-50, we choose that. And then once you start practicing that and analyzing replays, you're going to come to understand it more. You'll understand its strengths and disadvantages. And you can much easier start saying to yourself, I actually don't like this because of X and Y. Or you can say, I'm losing every game with this, but it's actually just because these little details I got to get better, right? But you're going to naturally learn to understand it. And then you can find better understanding of the game. But the most important thing is to have that clear direction. Without it, we cannot improve. We cannot improve our understanding. So I think this whole homework list is, I want every time you identify a problem on the ladder in a rewind, when you're doing a end of the week, write up on a few replays and you go, I just don't know when to attack in TVP or TVT. And then we can just choose a moment and we can write out a game plan, and it can be really rough at first and really I'm not really sure if this is correct, but we're just going to go with it. And then you can work on that through the course of your games and you can get better and better at it. And I really do think this will revolutionize your way of playing StarCraft and thinking about it. I mean, is this something you're eager to get into? I can hear a lot of resistance with making these decisions today. So I know it's not going to be easy. I know this is not something where you just flick a switch. It'll be a slow process, but are you at least kind of open to doing this as the process over the next week or two and trying to revamp your response to problems?
It's kind of hard, and especially writing when I got a problem, write down a solution which I think is right, and then trying it out. It takes more time and more time and more time, and I'm not that resistant to frustration actually. So I don't know. Sounds pretty frustrating pretty quick to me at the moment.
So I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and hopefully you trust me enough to believe me. But I've noticed that a lot. We've worked together for a while now, and frustration is definitely a key thing that happens. And I think there's a little bit of a mental block where we're thinking it's going to take more time because we're not doing the right things and we're practicing the wrong things. But what I've found is, because you aren't engaging with choosing a response to problems, there are points in your play which are just frozen and aren't improving nearly at the rate I see with some other players there's some people out there who are just like, I'll just do the thing. And sometimes they choose some dumb shit. Don't get me wrong. Like, they're the opposite of you. You're overly careful with your decision making. There's players who are like, well, I just do this. And I'm like, well, okay, that doesn't actually make any sense. You're executing it well, but it's actually strategically bad, and we should maybe consider our options a little bit more. They're on the opposite side of the spectrum, but you're on the side where, because you're not choosing a direction, you're actually often freezing up in these moments where you're getting deeper and deeper into losing confidence in these games, because you start to say, I'm not sure if I should do this or this. I'm not sure if I should do this or this. So whilst you're visualizing this idea of making a decision but then I'm practicing the wrong things, I think what you're not seeing is that you're already practicing the wrong things every game, and we all are as players, but especially when you don't make a decision. Anytime you find yourself in a game without a game plan, that's like, we need to just choose a decision and get better at it. And I'm telling you, you will execute so much better once you have that clear direction and focus. So how do we not get frustrated? How do we fight that? This clear focus and execution actually will do it. Okay, so what is the biggest thing with this clear focus and execution? Your default right now is, was the strategy right? Did I choose right? What should I choose, right? That's kind of the questions you're asking yourself on a daily basis, right? Every time you're getting wrecked by a 2-gate TVP opening, right? Fuck, should I have done this? Should I have done that? We need to change that to just, how can I do my plan better? What small changes can I make? What small improvements can I make? And I think you really need to just bury yourself in that focus for a while. And we need to remove the strategical questions and the, am I doing right or wrong? I keep bringing it up, and I feel like that's even a crime on my part, because I think that's, like I keep saying, that's down the track. You can learn the responses. You can learn the right response. If that's 10% of results for where you're at and your problems you're facing right now, that's 10% of the problems going on are the strategic choices. 90% is the clear focus and execution. I feel like what's happening is you're basically hitting a point in the game very regularly and you're not sure what to do. And then you become a bit more vague and your level of play drops as you lose track of what your goals are in the game. And this happens to me and it happens to everybody in StarCraft. The moment you don't have a clear focus, you just start making more mistakes. You start throwing armies away. You start not taking advantage of openings in terms of, maybe I could mass expand here against a totaling opponent. Maybe I could attack decisively and have just got a free win. We start losing those opportunities. We start also missing depots, missing mules, making little mechanical errors. So really, the clear focus here, it has to be just getting away from the strategic and just focusing on the execution, and also what tiny changes can we make to the execution. It's not about change the strategy. It's what tiny, minute changes. So don't change the big picture build. How can we change it and say, let's go back over that replay. Okay. So in terms of, think about what we did today. So in practice, what does that look like? Remember, we analyzed a replay today. What did we do? We obsessed over the barracks and its units being on time. And we took 9 seconds off 2 Marines, right? What did we do? Obsessed over the Reaper and what we could have done with it. And we obsessed over the factory, which you already did on your own, which was great. And what its priorities are. I think those 3 things, just going back over that early game, we defined that you should be tighter on your barracks. We defined a set plan for your Reaper when you're getting rushed. We defined exactly what your factory should do to get that Cyclone out faster and your tank to give you much more comfort. And that gives you these clear, actionable plans. You put those into practice the next time, you're going to kick some ass. So it's about really focusing on these minute focus points, these minute changes with what you do with what you've got. And I think that's going to be really massive. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a lot.
So focus on that last list, the one I got highlighted in the document. That's how you're going to put it into practice, okay? So the top, homework from today, we need to make a decision, just define the baseline response, okay? So what I'm putting in bold at the top, and then this stuff down here. These are the most important things for you to put into practice later tonight if you're still playing, or tomorrow. If you ignore everything else, you just focus on that, you will get it. So, homework. Besides what we've written there, reread the homework list tomorrow when your brain's fresh, because we've talked about a lot of shit today. And I really just want you to work on that. Shoot me a message in a few days or a week. Give me an update. I love that you've given me the occasional update on Discord. Give me an update on run through, okay, I struggled against the Bane Bust, and I wasn't sure if I should do this or this, but I just chose this. And I want you to tell me, report back to me, tell me a few of those choices you make where you're not sure if it's the right one, but you just choose one, you commit to it, you kick some ass. That's going to make me so happy, man. So I really want you to, hold yourself accountable by just messaging me some of those. And it's going to be a big change up in how you play StarCraft. But we're going to break out of that old mindset of umming and ahhing, and we're going to choose to be decisive. And I really think this is going to be awesome, man.
Okay.
All right, man. Read it tomorrow. Do it again. Focus on that. Kick some ass. I'll let your brain rest now. It's late night. Hopefully you get a lot of games in this weekend as well. But good to do another session with you, mate.
Yeah, same.
All right, man. Get some games in, get some rest in. Let your brain absorb some of the info, and have a good night, mate. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you. You too.
All right, no worries, man. Have a good night.
Bye.
All right. Okay. Woo! That's an intense session because that is such a mindset shift. But I really have faith. If he can follow through on that, I think we're gonna kind of break through the problem, which I touched on, but I was thinking about it before our session. I was like, what if there is one big thing that is that could get the maximum improvement here with this player? What is it? And I thought, you know what? It's about just making it a clear decision, because there was so much methodical finding of problems, mistakes, and all sorts of things. A barcode has just invited me to a party.